I was raised to stay quiet, even when it cost me everything. At Mom's birthday dinner, my father slammed his glass and called me useless because I wouldn't hand over the apartment. Everyone stared like I'd spit in the food. No one said a word when I stood up and said, "Then stop calling when you need money." They lied to the court. They stole from my uncle's will. And when I found out, they said I was crazy. But here's the thing. Silence doesn't protect you. It buries you. So I stopped being quiet. And what came next broke more than just the family. Want to know how far they went? And what I did? I showed up late. The traffic was bad, sure, but that wasn't why. I sat in the car across the street for nearly 15 minutes, watching the lights inside the house flicker against the curtains. Every now and then, a silhouette passed by, laughing, moving around, clinking glasses. They had already started without me. I grabbed the wine bottle from the passenger seat. It wasn't expensive, but it wasn't cheap either. Something smooth, something safe. I'd also brought Mom one of those digital photo frames, preloaded with family pictures I'd scanned, spent hours sorting them, thought maybe it'd mean something. As I stepped onto the porch, I already felt it, the hush just beyond the door. Not silence exactly, just a kind of energy that tells you you're the outsider. I knocked anyway. My sister opened the door. "You're late," she said, not moving aside. "Yeah, sorry." She stepped back, not before scanning me head to toe like she was checking if I'd spilled something on myself. Inside, everyone was already at the table. Laughter died the second I stepped in. Mom smiled. "Deveron, you made it." She stood up halfway like she wasn't sure whether to hug me or not. "I got held up. Happy birthday." I handed her the frame. "Oh, this is sweet." Her voice caught on the word. "Thought it'd be nice. Photos of us. From back when." She nodded. I glanced at Dad, Kenneth. He didn't even look up. Just swirled his drink in the glass like he was evaluating wine instead of the man who'd walked in. There was an empty chair at the end of the table. Not near anyone. Napkin folded differently. No name card. Everyone else had one. I sat down anyway. Darian, my older brother, leaned back with that familiar smirk. "Man of the hour shows up." Kenneth spoke without looking at me. "Too busy stacking checks to join the family, huh?" I said nothing. Mom chuckled nervously. "Let's just eat, okay? Everything's getting cold." I should have known from the seating alone. I wasn't one of them anymore. Dinner started. The clinking of forks on plates was louder than the conversation. They talked over me, around me, like I wasn't there. I watched Mom try to hold it all together, asking people if they wanted more potatoes, passing bread, pretending everything was normal. Then Kenneth leaned back, wiped his mouth with a napkin like he was about to say something important. "You know," he began, "that apartment could really help Darian and Lila settle in. Starting a family's no joke. Rent's sky high." I looked up. He wasn't asking. He was performing. "Sure," I said, "but I'm not handing over the lease." The room felt quieter than it already was. Darian looked at his plate. My sister raised her eyebrows like I'd just announced I hated babies and birthdays. Kenneth stared at me. "What do you mean?" he asked flatly. "I mean, I'm not giving them the apartment. You're not even living there. It's a 2-bedroom sitting empty while your brother and his wife are cramped in a shoebox. I'm keeping it." That's when he slammed his glass. The sound hit like a bullet. "You're the most useless one here. Get out." The words didn't echo. They didn't need to. The silence swallowed them whole. Mom didn't speak. She didn't even look at me. No one moved. Not Darian. Not my sister. Even the baby, Darian's toddler, stopped babbling in her booster seat. I stood. The chair scraped against the floor. I didn't rush. I didn't yell. I looked at each of them. One by one. People I grew up with. People I paid bills for, helped through college, sent money when they asked, fixed credit scores, co-signed loans, paid Mom's hospital bill in full. All complicit, all silent, all fine with it. As long as I stayed quiet, I fixed my jacket, then said it, then stop calling when you need money. It came out calm, clear, like I was placing a final puzzle piece on the table and walking away. Kenneth's face drained. His lips parted, but nothing came out. No one dared breathe. I turned, left the gift on the table, walked out the front door. No one followed. Not even Mom. The night was colder than I remembered. Not freezing, just hollow. You'd think I'd feel relief, vindication, like something heavy had finally been thrown off my back. But I didn't. I kept waiting for the weight to lift, and it didn't. I stood by the car for a minute, the engine still off, listening to nothing. What stuck with me wasn't the insult. It wasn't even the glass slam. It was the way they didn't flinch, the way they'd all practiced that moment before, like a line they'd waited for me to give. And I gave it. As I stared at the ceiling until sunrise, wasn't angry, just clear. You know that feeling when something finally clicks? When the weight on your chest isn't rage, but the dull, aching realization that you've been the fool all along. That's what kept me up. The silence at that dinner wasn't new. It had just finally stopped pretending to be something else. Around 3 a.m., I got out of bed and made coffee I didn't need. Sat at the kitchen table, lights off, scrolling through my phone in the dark. Dozens of texts over the years. All similar. Can you spot me till Friday? Car repairs came out of nowhere. Darian and Lila are short on rent this month. Mom's got that dental thing, but insurance won't cover it. Dad's truck needs new tires. You know how bad the roads are upstate. Funny how often they remembered I existed when a check was involved. When I said no at that table, it wasn't new. But this time, I said it in front of everyone. And that broke the rules. I couldn't stop thinking about that look Mom gave me. Not anger, not even disappointment. Just retreat, like she'd already decided I wasn't worth defending. I opened my laptop, halfway intending to work, maybe distract myself, didn't get far. A memory came back out of nowhere, vivid, like someone hit play on an old VHS. I was 16. Rain poured so hard the gutters in front of the house overflowed like broken pipes. I stood in the driveway, soaked through, holding the trash bag Dad had just told me to take out. I was still in school clothes, my backpack on the ground by the porch. Kenneth stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "You're the man of the house, too. Stop acting like a damn guest." He'd shouted it over the thunder. I remember it clearly because it was the first time he used that line on me, like it was some title I hadn't earned yet. Inside, I could see Darian through the window, on the couch, dry, playing video games, feet up. Mom was in the kitchen, pretending not to hear. I was working a part-time job then, bagging groceries after school, saving up for community college. Nobody asked where I was every afternoon. Nobody cared what I was saving for. But when I got home, if the dishes weren't done or the trash was full, I was the lazy one, the problem, the outsider. Back in the present, I blinked and the screensaver had kicked in. I tapped the touchpad and my inbox glowed again. Reflexively, I typed up an email to the landlord. Request to terminate the lease early. Financial hardship. That sort of thing. I hovered over send. I thought about Darian and Lila and their smug little condo dreams. Thought about how they'd post photos in front of my old building like they earned it. And I thought about what that would say about me. The man who once stood in the rain, taking orders from a father who never saw him. I didn't send it. I just closed the tab. Later that day, after I managed a few hours of broken sleep, I called Hallie, my sister. She picked up on the third ring, voice low, like she wasn't sure it was a good idea. "Hey," I said. "Hey, you got a minute?" A pause. "What do you want, Deveron?" That hit harder than it should have. I exhaled, trying to make sense of last night. She was quiet. Then she said, "Dad was just stressed. You know how he gets." "No, Hallie, I don't. You could have handled it differently." I laughed, short and bitter. "He humiliated me, and no one blinked." She didn't deny it. I asked, "So the price of being loved is real estate?" Click. She hung up. I sat on the couch for a long time after that. No TV, no noise, just the sound of my neighbor's dog barking in the hallway. Eventually, I got up, walked to the window. The city looked the same as always, gray buildings, yellow taxis, lights flickering from windows like Morse code. But I felt different. Like I'd finally been uninvited from a game I never signed up to play. I was ready to shut it all down for the night when my phone buzzed on the counter. One new message. It was from Mom. Just 4 words. "Can we talk soon?" "What? The message sat in my inbox like it didn't belong. Can we talk soon? I didn't answer right away, just stared at it for what felt like hours. I read those 4 words over and over, waiting for them to say something more than they did. Waiting for some apology between the lines, some sign that she saw me that night at the dinner table. Really saw me. But nothing came. Next morning, I texted her back. Yeah, you picked the time. She chose the cafe near the river. We used to go there after my therapy sessions back when I was 23 and barely holding it together. She used to sit out front with a book, waiting, saying things like, "Take your time, baby. No rush." I hadn't been back there in over a decade. I got there early. The same cracked vinyl booths, same coffee-stained walls, same burnt muffin smell clinging to the air like old smoke. I picked the corner seat by the window, the one where you could watch the water pass behind the old post office building. Then I saw her walking in. She hadn't changed much, but there was something in the way she moved. Slower, a little more careful, like someone who wasn't sure if they were welcome. She was wearing that perfume. That same damn perfume from when I was little. Light, floral, a little powdery. It hit me before she sat down, and for a second, I was 5 again, being tucked into bed after a nightmare, with her hand smoothing my hair and telling me, "It's all right, sweetheart, I'm here." She smiled like it was still that simple. "Hey, Dev." "Hey." We hugged, kind of, one of those quick ones, 2 people leaning in just enough to say they tried. Then we sat. She started with small talk, asked about my job, how the apartment was holding up, whether I still made those rosemary potatoes she liked. I answered, kept it short, not cold, just tired. Then her voice dropped. "Your father didn't mean what he said." I didn't flinch. I'd expected that to come out of her mouth sooner or later. She always started there, trying to soften what couldn't be softened. She leaned in, lowering her voice like we were planning a prison break. "He's just under a lot of pressure. You know how he gets. And Darian and Laura, they're expecting." I didn't say anything. They really need stability, a place to raise the baby, somewhere safe. That's when she pulled it out of her purse, a manila envelope, thicker than it needed to be. She placed it on the table like it might burn her fingers. "This is just something your father put together. Nothing final, just a request." I didn't touch it. She unfolded the flap and slid a paper out. Notarized. Request for voluntary lease transfer. My name at the top. Darian's at the bottom. Kenneth's signature in the middle like a knife wound. "You're not married," she said gently. "You don't have kids. You don't need that much space." I looked at her, not with anger. Not even shock, just that sinking feeling when you realize the person in front of you isn't here to see you. They're here to sell you something you already said no to. "So, that's what this meeting was about?" She hesitated. "I just want peace, Dev. We've been through so much and I can't take any more fighting." I reached out and slid the envelope back toward her. "You didn't come here to talk." Her eyes welled up, but no tears fell. "You came here to clean up his mess, and you thought using the mother card would make it easier." She opened her mouth, but I shook my head. "I've given enough. Time, money, room to breathe. What I haven't done is stand up and say no out loud in front of everyone." I stood. She reached across the table, tried to grab my wrist. I stepped back. "Stop asking me to be the quiet one," I said. "I'm done buying silence with sacrifice." The cafe had gotten quieter while we talked, or maybe I just started noticing it. A couple 2 booths down glanced up. I turned to leave. Got halfway to the door when I heard her voice, barely above a whisper, but sharp enough to cut clean. "You'll regret this." I didn't turn around, didn't say a word, but her words followed me all the way back to the street. And the way she said it, not desperate, not wounded, just certain, stayed with me longer than it should have. "Betrayal." I didn't know it then, but she meant it literally. A few days passed. I didn't reach out, didn't answer calls, just worked, kept to myself, walked around my apartment like a man pacing a shoreline, waiting for something to rise up from under the tide. Then it came, tucked into a white envelope stamped with the county seal. Notice of occupancy change. My name was typed on the top in bold next to a checkbox marked voluntary release of unit. Below that was a signature block, signed, supposedly, by me. And next to it, a notary stamp. Someone named Gary H. Bennett. The box listed him as a witness. I'd never heard of the man, never met him. I stared at the paper, not angry at first, just numb. The kind of numb you get after being hit too many times in the same spot. They were trying to write me off, not from the family, but from the paperwork, from the records, from the very structure of my own address. I took the paper, grabbed my jacket, and drove straight to the county clerk's office. The woman behind the desk looked tired. She had that kind of permanent frown that comes from decades of staring at forms. When I handed her the document, she didn't blink. "You got ID?" she asked. I gave it to her. 10 minutes later, she came back with a scanned copy of what they had on file. It was worse than I thought. There was a second form, a family consent addendum, listing Kenneth and Berenice as household heads, and me as a transitional cohabitant. The language sounded like something out of a social worker's manual. And right under that, someone had scrawled my signature. My name, my handwriting, forged, sloppy, off-tilt. "They're trying to erase me out of paper," I muttered. "Like I was never there." The woman looked at me, her eyes softening. "Happens more often than you'd think," she said. "Family's got its own laws." I drove back through the city, headlights flashing off wet pavement. It had rained earlier, and the roads still carried that shine like they were pretending to be cleaner than they really were. I didn't go home. I went to their house. Darian's truck was in the driveway, parked too close to the hedge like always. The porch light was on, and from the living room window I saw Laura moving around, big belly, holding a mug. She opened the door before I could knock. Her smile was too soft. "Hey, Dev," she said, brushing hair from her cheek. "It's been a while." "Is Kenneth home?" She nodded, stepped aside. "He's in the garage, working on that old shelf again." I didn't go in. "Can you tell him I'm outside?" She paused, glanced toward the hallway, then looked back at me. "We just want everything to be smooth," she said. "You've always been the strong one, Dev." I didn't answer, just walked back down the steps and waited by the driveway. A few minutes later, the garage door creaked open. Kenneth stepped out, wiping his hands with a rag that looked older than I was. He walked like nothing was wrong, like the last few weeks hadn't happened. "Didn't expect to see you here," he said. I held up the envelope. "You want to tell me what this is?" He looked at it. Didn't even blink. "Paperwork." "Paperwork," I repeated. "You're blowing it out of proportion," he said, shrugging. "Nobody's evicting you. It's just logistics, getting things aligned for the baby. You know how complicated these lease things get." I took a step closer. "You forged my name." "That's a big word. You had a neighbor I've never met sign off." "You mean Gary? He used to mow the lawn here 10 years ago." "Don't be dramatic," I laughed, short, bitter. "You didn't just want the apartment," I said. "You wanted to rewrite everything. Who stayed, who helped, who mattered." Kenneth folded the rag, stuck it in his back pocket. "If you want to start a war," he said calmly, "fine. But don't expect your mother to pick sides." That stung. Not because he was wrong, but because he already knew she wouldn't. I nodded slowly. "So, this is what family means now." "It means doing what's best for everyone," he replied. "Sometimes that means stepping aside." He turned to go back into the garage, but then paused. "Oh, one more thing," he added over his shoulder. "That savings account your uncle left you a few years back?" I felt the hairs on my neck rise. "You might want to double-check who's managing it now." The garage door creaked again as it closed, and there I was, standing in the driveway like an outsider. Again, not with answers. Just one question swirling louder than the rest. How much of my life have they already taken? A night I drove home in silence. No radio, no thoughts I wanted to admit out loud. Just that question playing over and over in my head, which, like a drip in a quiet room, how much of my life have they already taken? Back at the apartment, I didn't bother to take my coat off. I went straight to the hallway closet, pulled out the old cardboard box labeled Taxes Lionel. I hadn't touched it in years. I only kept it out of guilt. Inside were forms, letters, a few framed photos of Uncle Lionel and me. The summer we rebuilt his porch, the Christmas he surprised me with a used laptop, the look on his face when I'd been accepted to community college. He wasn't just my uncle. He was the first adult who ever asked me what I wanted from life and waited for the full answer. Buried near the bottom was a manila folder with the life insurance documents, the original policy. Clear as day, I was the sole beneficiary. It was dated, signed, witnessed. I remember when he'd given it to me. "Don't tell your parents," he said, handing me the sealed envelope. "This isn't about them." At the time, I thought he was being dramatic. Now I wasn't so sure. I opened my laptop and logged into the insurance company's site. It took a few minutes. Security questions, password reset, another verification. Then it loaded. Claim status under litigation. My chest tightened. I read it again. Litigation. I didn't even know it had been disputed. The page didn't say much, just that the policy was under review and that multiple parties had filed a counterclaim. I sat there for a while, not angry, not even surprised anymore. I was tired. By morning, I was parked in front of a legal aid office downtown. They opened at 9 o'clock. I got there at 8:30 holding a coffee I didn't drink. My hand was shaking, not from caffeine. A junior paralegal named Mia called my name around 10:15, early 20s, polite, overworked. I told her my story. She typed, listened. Then her expression changed. She leaned closer to her screen, clicked through something. "You said your uncle's name was Lionel Stokes?" I nodded. She hesitated, then swiveled the screen slightly toward me. "I probably shouldn't show you this," she said under her breath, "but I saw this case a week ago. It flagged our system for a potential conflict. I just didn't realize it was you." The document on screen was redacted in parts, but the names were there. Kenneth Stokes, Darian Stokes, listed as family claimants. They'd filed a motion alleging I was estranged from Lionel, that I hadn't visited him in his final year, that he had expressed intent to revise the beneficiary but hadn't gotten around to it. It was all lies. But that wasn't the worst part. The next sentence nearly knocked the air from my lungs. "The named beneficiary, Mr. Deveron Stokes, is presently under psychiatric supervision and has demonstrated patterns of financial instability." I reread it. Again and again. That's what they told the court. That I was unstable, unfit, my own family. I don't remember walking out of the building. I don't remember crossing the street. Next thing I knew, I was sitting on a wooden bench near the waterfront. There were birds screeching somewhere overhead, and the smell of salt water and fried food from a nearby cart lingered in the air. I wasn't crying. I wasn't thinking. I wasn't. A young guy sat down a few feet from me, hoodie, headphones half on. He was on the phone, his voice loud but cracking. "Yeah, well, maybe if you actually listened to me for once, I wouldn't be failing everything." Silence, then a sigh. "Whatever. You always make it my fault." He hung up, exhaled like the wind had just given up on him. I turned, slowly. "You okay?" He looked over, surprised I'd spoken. Shrugged. "Used to it." His answer was simple, but it cut me deeper than anything else that day. "Used to it." "Yeah. Me too." I nodded. I was too. He didn't ask what I meant, just pulled his hoodie back up and stared out at the waves. My phone buzzed, a message from Mom, just one line. "If you come to the family meeting tomorrow, don't embarrass us." No greeting, no emotion, just a warning disguised as etiquette. And somewhere in the quiet between that moment and the next, something in me shifted. It didn't explode, it didn't scream, it cracked. And I got there right on time. Didn't want them thinking I was afraid to show up, or worse, that I was avoiding it. The porch light was already on, even though it wasn't fully dark yet. Their little way of saying, "We're waiting." I stepped through the door, and the first thing that hit me wasn't the sight of them. It was the smell. That same potpourri Moms kept for years, like artificial lavender trying to cover something that's been rotting too long. They were all there. Kenneth, sitting at the head of the dining table, like it was some corporate boardroom. Berenice next to him, wringing her hands around a mug of something she probably wasn't drinking. Darian had one arm draped around Laura, who looked uncomfortable in that performative kind of way. like she was playing peacemaker but had already chosen sides. Even Vernon showed up. He didn't even live in the state, yet somehow he made it in time for this intervention, ceremony. I wasn't sure what to call it. The table had a few bowls of chips, water bottles, folded napkins, like they were about to start a church committee meeting. I stayed standing. Kenneth smiled, the kind of smile you give someone right before stabbing them with polite words. Glad you could make it, Dev. He stood, handed out stapled packets, some things to help guide the conversation. He didn't hand one to me. I glanced at the pages as they were passed. Family asset planning, support structures, adjustments to household dynamics. Sounded like they were trying to sell me out with bullet points and bulletproof niceties. Berenice was the first to speak, her voice soft, measured, the mom tone. We all love you, Dev, but maybe it's time to let go of certain things, for the sake of harmony. Harmony. That word again. Laura chimed in with a practiced, sympathetic smile. You could do so much more with your life if you weren't clinging to that apartment. Maybe something healthier, something more freeing? I wanted to ask her if that's what she told herself when she let my brother lie to a judge, but I didn't. Not yet. I stayed quiet, just listened, until Darian couldn't help himself. He leaned forward, chuckled. Dev, come on. You've always been kinda, background. Don't make this messier than it has to be. My jaw clenched. I wasn't even sure what that meant. Background? Like a piece of furniture, a placeholder until the real family showed up? Then Kenneth slammed his palm on the table, that same sudden, angry thump he used when I was 15 and didn't mow the lawn. Right. The room went silent. You're the most useless one here, he barked. Always the victim. Always the one dragging us down. Get out if you can't act like family. That did it. Something in me snapped, but it didn't explode. It moved slow, calm. I took off my coat, folded it, looked each of them in the eye. Then I spoke, not loud, not rushed, just clear. Then stop calling when you need money. Kenneth's face turned a shade I hadn't seen since the day I told him I wouldn't co-sign Darian's last loan. Lara's head dropped. Vernon looked away. I didn't wait for their next line. I didn't want the rebuttal, the excuses, the manipulation disguised as concern. I walked to the door, took my time with the knob. Behind me, just as it clicked open, someone whispered, maybe Vernon, maybe Mom. I couldn't tell. We went too far. No one said it louder. No one stopped me, and I didn't look back. What they didn't know was I wasn't walking away. I was walking toward something. The next morning I skipped the coffee, and no time for comfort. I needed clarity, not caffeine. The public records office was about half full when I arrived. A few retirees digging into property boundaries. One woman printing birth certificates. Me? I was there to pull the thread no one thought I'd bother tugging. I gave the clerk a list. Lionel Stokes, power of attorney, will, estate transfers, anything filed in the last 3 years. It took an hour before she came back with a stack. Some of it was familiar, dates I remembered, transactions I vaguely recalled helping with when Lionel was alive. But right in the middle of it was something new, a reference to a revised will, dated just 2 weeks before his passing. That wasn't the version I'd seen in 2017, the one where my name was on every line that mattered. This new will was thinner. Tucked in was an annotation, filed under verified update, co-signed by family witnesses. Family. I didn't need to guess who that meant. I stood there in the hallway with copies in my hand, staring through the glass windows like they could offer some kind of answer. Then I drove, didn't even think, just turned the key and let the car lead me. Mr. Chantry lived in a quiet assisted living place out in the valley. Not a full nursing home, just a room and staff that made sure he remembered to eat. He was thinner than I remembered. Glasses fogged up when he saw me. Deveron? I nodded. Son, I thought you'd never come back. I didn't sit right away. I didn't even smile. I need to ask you something about Lionel's will. His mouth flattened, eyes narrowed behind those old lenses. You're not the first to ask, he said slowly, but you're the only one I'm willing to answer. I pulled out a copy of the revised will, showed him the signature, the date. He didn't even need to lean forward. That's not mine. My stomach turned. You're sure? I'm old, Dev, not senile. That's not the document I filed. Lionel left everything to you. Said you were the only one who showed up without a handout. He paused. Actually, he fumbled in his side drawer, pulled out a yellow envelope already prepped. He gave me this, told me to keep it sealed, just in case anything ever got messy. My fingers shook as I took it. The car ride back was silent, no music, no air, just the sound of my own teeth grinding. I waited until I got home, sat at my desk like I was back in college again, nervous before an exam. Inside the envelope was a short note in Lionel's handwriting. If you're reading this, they did what I feared they might. Use this only when you're ready. And a USB stick. I plugged it in, waited. A folder popped open. Insurance addendum, audio logs. There were 3 files, each one a recorded conversation. First, Lionel speaking calmly to Kenneth. The audio was scratchy but clear. No, Ken, I'm not changing anything. He's my nephew. He took care of me when no one else did. Kenneth's voice, sharp, cutting. It's not just about you, Lionel. The whole family has a future to think about. Second recording, Darian. Uncle, come on. You can't seriously believe Dev is the best person to manage any of this. He was there when your brother died, Lionel snapped. Where were you? The third file was harder to hear, but the ending stuck. Lionel saying, if either of you try to manipulate this will, you'll lose everything. There's a clause. I buried it deep. I searched the insurance documents I had, scanned every page. There it was, page 47 of the policy addendum. In the event of documented forgery or attempted coercion, all secondary family claims are nullified. I leaned back, let the chair take my weight. They dug their own grave, but I didn't call them. Didn't storm their house with papers. Didn't send screenshots or emails. Instead, I made one quiet phone call, Jana Kim. We hadn't spoken in years, not since undergrad, but I knew she was a shark in heels now, working for a mid-sized firm out of Tacoma. She picked up on the second ring. Dev, it's been forever. I've got something for you. It's real, it's big, and it's dirty. She paused. Talk. I gave her the short version. She didn't hesitate. Send everything. I'll loop in my senior partner. This might take a few days, but Dev... Yeah? If this holds up, you won't have to say a word. The law will speak for you. I hung up. Didn't smile. Didn't cry. Just stared out the window and thought about every family dinner, every lie disguised as concern, every hug that came with a condition. I wasn't going to knock on their door. I was going to let justice do it for me. And by Monday morning, everything was in motion. I sat at Jana's office across from a tall stack of printed documents, timestamps, audio logs, and certified affidavits. She slid the fraud petition across the table for my final signature. Her tone was calm but edged with tension. The moment this hits the system, they'll know you're not bluffing. I signed without blinking. Good. By the time I got home, it was barely past 8 a.m. I hadn't eaten. I wasn't hungry. I left my phone on the counter and let it vibrate unanswered for nearly 20 minutes before I checked the screen. 7:04 a.m. Darian. Dev, what the hell did you do? 7:06 a.m. Berenice. Voice note. Her voice cracked with that false sweetness she'd mastered over the years. We should talk. This doesn't have to be messy, sweetheart. We're still family. 8:12 a.m. Vernon. Just the eyes emoji. Sent it like he was watching a TV show. Then said nothing. No Kenneth. Until 9:17 a.m. We need to talk now. I didn't answer. And not then. Not at all. I spent the rest of the morning cleaning, not because the apartment needed it, but because I did. Wiping down the counter, sorting papers I already sorted last week, folding laundry I barely wore. Around 6:40 p.m., I heard the knock. 3 taps. Firm. Unapologetic. I knew who it was. I opened the door, slowly. Kenneth stood there, in a gray blazer. No tie. Just tension coiled in his jaw. His voice came low, calculated. "You could have come to us." I said nothing. "You really filed this? Over what? Some old recordings from a bitter man?" I stepped back and left the door open. He took the invitation and walked in, his steps heavy like he was forcing control with each one. "I don't think you understand what you're doing," he said. I crossed my arms. "You're throwing away every bridge you had left." I stared at him. "The bridges were already burned. You just assumed I wouldn't look up from the ashes." He rolled his eyes. "So what, you're trying to get even?" "No," I said calmly. "I'm trying to restore what was stolen." Kenneth's composure cracked a little. "You're going to destroy this family over paperwork?" I laughed. Not loudly, but real. This family destroyed itself when it decided the truth wasn't worth preserving. He looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. "You've always been dramatic, Dev." That word again. Dramatic. I stepped toward the kitchen, pulled open the drawer next to the fridge, took out the folded insurance clause, the one Lionel had buried like a landmine for liars. I placed it flat on the table. Kenneth didn't move. I pointed at the line that mattered. In the event of documented forgery or attempted coercion, all secondary family claims are nullified. "You didn't just lie," I said, my voice level. "You voided yourselves." His mouth opened, then closed, then opened again, trying to find the right mix of authority and fear, but I could see it. He knew. This wasn't a threat. This was done. "You're not just losing an apartment, Kenneth," I said. "You're losing your legacy, because that's what you tried to erase in me." He stepped back like I'd shoved him. His pride had nowhere to go. "You think you're better than us now?" he snapped. I shook my head. "No. I just stopped pretending you were better than me." He stood there another second. 2, maybe, breathing through his nose like he might say something else. But he didn't. He turned, walked to the door, opened it. But just before stepping out, he looked back one last time, eyes hollowed, tone flat. "You'll regret this." I didn't flinch. "Maybe," I said, "but I'll regret silence more." After the door clicked shut, I stood in place for a while. Still, not angry, not shaking, just still. Then I walked over to the hallway rack. My jacket was hanging there, the one I wore to Mom's birthday dinner. The one I clutched when Kenneth humiliated me in front of everyone. I took it down, buttoned it, slowly, one at a time. Back then, I wore it to cover the crack in my spine. Tonight, I wore it because I stood straight on my own. No need for armor, no need for fear, just clarity. But victory never comes clean. And sometimes the final punch doesn't land where you expected. The ruling came on a gray Thursday morning. No fanfare, no courtroom drama, just a document emailed by Jana at 9:12 a.m. Original will reinstated. All amendments void due to fraudulent intent. Secondary claimants, Berenice Stokes and Darian Stokes, permanently barred from contesting further. Kenneth Stokes, liable for restitution of redirected assets totaling $78,300. I read it once, then again, and I felt nothing. No relief, no joy, just a hollowness I couldn't name, like standing in a burned-down house with a key in your pocket. What do you unlock now? That same afternoon, the phone rang. I let it go to voicemail. But the second call came from Laura. I picked up. Her voice was flat, quiet. "Mom's in the hospital. Stroke mild, they think." She didn't ask if I'd come. She just hung up. The fluorescent lights in the hospital waiting area always made everything feel colder, like even hope had to go through a metal detector before entering. I walked down the hallway, turned the corner, and saw him. Kenneth. Sitting outside room 217, hands clasped, eyes forward. Didn't even flinch when he saw me. I sat down next to him. Neither of us said a word. Machines beeped inside, rhythmic, unforgiving, No apology. No tears. Just the silence of men who'd run out of things to blame each other for. After an hour, I left. I couldn't stay longer. Not for her. Not for him. I drove without music, without direction, and somehow ended up in front of Lionel's old place. The porch was sagging, shingles missing near the roof line, but the swing, the old wooden swing he used to sit on with his cup of black coffee, still hung there, and taped to its armrest was an envelope, yellowed, faded ink. My name in Lionel's handwriting. I stood staring at it for longer than I should have. When I opened it, the letter inside was barely 1 page. They'll never see your worth until it costs them. But you saw mine when it meant nothing. I sat on that swing for a long time, letter in hand, eyes unfocused. The wind blew. The chain creaked, and for once, I didn't brace for something to fall apart. 2 Sundays later, there was another family gathering. I wasn't invited, but I showed up anyway. Same house, same dining room, same nervous tension when I walked through the front door. Berenice blinked like she'd seen a ghost. Darian looked away. Kenneth stood up, cleared his throat. I held up a hand. You don't have to say anything, I said. Just live right. That's all I ever wanted. He sat back down. Nobody clapped. Nobody protested. It was like someone had finally dropped the act, and no one knew what to do with the quiet. Toward the end of the night, I grabbed my coat from the hook near the door. Same one I'd worn to Mom's birthday. I slid my arms through it slowly, like it had aged with me. As I turned to leave, I felt a hand on my sleeve. It was her, Mom. She looked smaller now, fragile, but she didn't say a word. Just lifted the collar, gently, like she used to when I was 10 and headed off to school without zipping up. A small adjustment, a quiet touch. The kind that speaks where words have failed for years. I left quietly, not because I was small, but because I had nothing left to prove.